Hello, everyone. I hope you're having either a great morning, evening, or night. About a month ago, I put a poll in the community tab of the channel asking how people felt about me doing a video on where I would do some deep dives in charts and the charting process and all of that. And the reaction was actually pretty good. People were very open to the idea. So this is that video, kind of. Why kind of is because, my first thought when I went into doing this project was doing kind of a very technical talk, how EOF works, and all of that. But I kind of didn't want to do that anymore because I ended up thinking, I think people already know how to use EOF, and there are other tools and other material that's better suited for people who want to learn how to use the software. So instead of that, I kind of thought about doing a video about how I chart things in a more conceptual, way of thinking. Like why in this drum fill, this tom is a yellow and this tom is a green. Why in this song I'm charting the splash symbol as a yellow symbol, and why in this song I'm charting a splash as a blue. So that kind of thing that's more conceptual rather than technical. This video might be a little bit rambly, a little bit like stream of consciousness because it is not like 100% scripted. I know some points that I want to go, and on the editing, I'm going to do my best to make my thoughts be as concise as possible. First of all, to anyone who's never seen me here, I am Alex. I am, the person who runs this channel, the person whose name is in the channel. I am a Brazilian musician. I was born, raised, and still live in the same city here in Brazil. Well, even though I am a professional musician, I am a guitarist. As you guys can see in my instrument rack here, I have 4 guitars and a bass because that's what I have been making like the most musically. I started playing guitar when I was 13 years old. I'm almost 28, so I haven't been being a musician for more than half of my life at this point. But my thing with drums and playing drums started to have my first bands in which we were able to go to rehearsal spaces with an actual drum set because I never had a drum set at home. They are expensive, at least more expensive than guitars. And I could actually, in these rehearsal spaces, in the off time that I have like between songs when people are tuning up, in which I could sit in a drum set and play, and and I don't know, something clicked, and I started to get like addicted about drums. And due to the fact that I never had a drum set in my home, either acoustic drum set or an electronic drum set, because those are also pretty expensive. So I kind of always lived vicariously through rhythm games, especially Rock Band and Guitar Hero, to kind of satisfy my need of consuming drum-oriented content. When I was 15, I would get like a couple of pencils because I didn't have drumsticks, and I would just line up like different things that I had in my house that would sound like a snare, kind of sound like a tom. And with the pencils, I would put on YouTube videos of people playing Rock Band, drums on Rock Band, and I would go along much to the same way that a lot of you probably sit on your drum kits, watch my videos, and play along reading the charts in real time, which is, I think it's kind of how the circle of life goes. I think that's very interesting. By the way, very shameless self-plug. I'm very sorry about this. If you want to skip it, that's okay. Just go to this point in the video here. I have a Twitch channel that I have been serious about for like a year now, and we're growing. That's working out, is my main source of income. And there I do mostly like rhythm games oriented stuff, so Guitar Hero, Clone Hero, Rocksmith, and then other stuff like I have been playing like Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga for like a month, and yeah, I'm having a blast. So if one day you feel like checking it out, just chatting, making new friends, engaging, and just being part of a community, I'm going to put the link for that in the description below. Okay, that part is over. Let's go forward. So I think that really to understand why I chart the way that I do, and then why I have some biases towards, certain ways that the chart should look, because charts are visual ways to represent the performance of a song. We have to unwind a bit, and with a bit, more than 10 years ago when Rock Band came out. When Rock Band 1 came out, it was this very new thing. It was like direct competition with Guitar Hero, which was a franchise that was already established, very established at that point, and going to get even larger as time went on and eventually die. I think that Rock Band, that really shaped the way that I see how charts would go. So when Rock Band 1 came out, there was no pro drums on, 4 pads and 3 cymbals. There were 4 pads, the kick drum, and that was it. They would have to make do with that, as primitive as that can look to us today. Honestly, looking at the 4 pads, it is very intuitively, because of all of the instruments, I think that the drums on rhythm games, they translate very well to the real thing. And if you go to the disc songs on Rock Band 1, you can see how the biases they would have to have. Like the snare was always a red and the kick was always going to be the line. But we're going to put the hi-hat. The hi-hat was usually put in the yellow lane, which makes sense, especially when people are usually used to playing like with a cross-handed. So you're using the hi-hat on your right hand and the snare on your left hand. So it would make sense to have, the hi-hat on yellow or blue that is accessible with your right hand, and then with your left hand that you usually play the snare, it would be the leftmost pad, in that case, the red. But I think that you can really see that they have a very set hierarchy on how the colors work. When you're talking about like symbols wise, green is usually going to be a crash cymbal, blue is usually going to be a right cymbal, yellow is usually going to be either a closed hi-hat or another crash cymbal when you would hit like 2 crash cymbals at the same time. The drum chart of Tom Sawyer is a great way to see that, because the yellow is the closed hi-hat and the blue is the open hi-hat, because there's a lot of dynamics in the hi-hat on the song. And then on the toms, it would be as intuitive as it gets. Snare, tom 1, tom 2, floor tom. And then after that, it came the pro drums, in which you would have the 4 pads and the 3 cymbals, in which there would be even more like a drum set, because you have like, if there was a blue cymbal note, you cannot just hit the blue tom note. You have to hit the right note in the right place. If it is a blue cymbal, you have to write the blue cymbal, which I think was a stroke of genius on the part of the people of Rock Band. And comparing to when drums started to appear on Guitar Hero World Tour, the drum set was completely different. Instead of having 4 tom pads, they only have 3 pads, which is a snare, a middle tom, and a floor tom, which usually was pretty badly charted. You would have the drum fills, especially drum fills that encompass a fairly good amount of toms, usually be very like boringly charted, because you're going back and forth on the blue and green, instead of like going from yellow, blue, and green, which is way more intuitive and more natural and feels like a drum set. Actually, Guitar Hero came first with the thing of having 2 cymbals, which were the yellow note and the orange note. But if you are on the internet and start doing research about how the Guitar Hero drum set worked, they were very unreliable, especially the first units. And people would most likely just have a Rock Band drum set at home and use that instead of going out and buying another peripheral. Due to the fact that Guitar Hero since day one accepted the 4-lane Rock Band style drums, instead of having the 5-lane, the game would automatically detect that you have a 4-lane drum, a Rock Band drum, and adapt to that, giving you only 4 lanes. That's what people just did. That's kind of the interesting part, because if you look at Rock Band, they had the better drum kit with the pro drums that was more akin to the real thing. But Guitar Hero had double bass. But one thing that I think is very interesting to note about the whole Guitar Hero 5-lane drum mechanics is that instead of the counterpart of Rock Band, that they just have like, they just pretty much transposed the would-be tom lanes into cymbal lanes. So you have a yellow tom note and a yellow cymbal note, a blue tom note and a blue cymbal note, and a green tom note and a green cymbal note. Instead, on a Guitar Hero 5 lane, the orange and the yellow, they would be always cymbal notes. They will never be tom notes. So that will leave the snare as the red as usual, the blue as a tom, the green as a lower tom in comparison, and usually the yellow as the hi-hat and a crash cymbal, and the orange as a ride cymbal or a crash cymbal. And with that, when they were introduced first on Guitar Hero World Tour, another interesting mechanic is the mechanic of dynamics, that you can see sometimes there are slightly different shaped gems. They are the kind of dynamics of the mechanic of the game. So if you see that gem in a snare lane, that means kind of a rim shot. If you see that on the yellow lane, that probably means that is an open hi-hat if you're playing a usually closed hi-hat in the yellow lane. And if you see that on the orange lane, usually it means that is a China cymbal. And on the blue and green, they're just like usual dynamics. Great examples of how these dynamics are used in game are pretty much every Metallica chart from Guitar Hero Metallica. There's a lot of those there, and they're really interesting once you learn kind of how to read what they mean. And after that, on the Guitar Hero Worlds of Rock, if I'm not mistaken, on the Expert Plus difficulty, which means that you can use, double kicks on the songs, also brings ghost snare notes. Usually they're all only on snare, and they're kind of translucent. They kind of look like tap notes on the guitar and bass, but they just really mean ghost notes, and they're a really fun mechanic along with the dynamics gems. And the Expert Plus is a very, very complete, mechanic, is a very complete way of playing, in my opinion. So even though you might have like a tom missing, you would play the song the way that it is. So every franchise had their cons and their pros, and having that experience to me is very telling on the biases that I carry when I am charting my own stuff, because I still apply a lot of the reasoning that the charters of Rock Band used to chart, the songs in game. To me, a crash cymbal is going to be a green cymbal. To me, a right cymbal is going to be predominantly a blue cymbal. And all of that, I still carry those biases. But nothing is really set in stone. When I started to chart my stuff, if you go really, really way back in the channel, in the first videos, you can see that I use conventions, and I would put stuff in places that today I wouldn't do that anymore, or I would try to find other ways to do. Because just like probably the people who charted for harmonics, I also have this kind of a hierarchy of what goes what, especially on the cymbals. Because that's kind of the point. I think that when you want to work on a song, the decisive factor on how hard, how out of the box sometimes you're gonna have to think to make the chart work and be, as lifelike as possible, of course, that being your purpose, is going to be directly influenced by, first of all, the style of music that you're covering and the drummer. And second of all, I think that's kind of overlooked, how extensive and big the drums of that drummer are. Like some time ago, I started this process of whenever I would chart a song, the first thing that I would do is kind of try to see the drummer. what he uses, how many symbols he has, how many toms he has, because that's going to be, as I said, a decisive factor on how you have to think. A good example of that is on a song that I charted some time ago called Code Company by Minus the Bear. Please check out. That song is really good. It's a hidden gem that I discovered on Rocksmith. The song is like really good. The song is very simple. But one of the things that was very interesting is that when I went to see live performances of the song and see pictures of the drummer, or try to find pictures of the drum set in the studio on the recording sessions, I saw that the drummer has a very modest drum kit. He only has like 2 crash cymbals, right, hi-hat, snare, kick, 1 rack tom, and 1 floor tom. That tells me something. That tells me that throughout that song, I'm most likely never going to chart a tom as a blue if he only has the high tom and the floor tom and nothing here. So I'm probably only going to hear like 2 toms, which is a low tom and a high tom. And, just from listening, I know that one is always in the yellow and one is always in the green. And that's really good because I'm not going to have to hack my brain being like, oh, okay, so on which tom is he starting? Is this the same tom that he hit on that drum fill in the chorus? Because even when you have the isolated drum tracks, as example, come to a conclusion and like, okay, this drummer has at least 3 rack toms and at least 2 floor toms, I think. And you listen to a drum fill and you're like, oh, okay, he's starting on the very highest tom and stopping on the first floor. 1 minute after that, when he does another drum fill, is already enough time to lose your reference of what goes where. Wait. How does the highest tom sound again? What is the pitch of that? Okay, so you kind of have to go back and forth to kind of remind yourself of which pitch is which drum, which is tiring to say the least. Another example of a drummer having a very simple drum kit is Shannon Lucas on Other Remains Fall of Ideas record, because it's pretty much the same configuration. If you see live performances, if you see pictures, if you see the videos, he has only a high tom and a floor tom. So you know that throughout the whole album, there's not going to be a single blue tom note because there's no second rack tom. Going back a little bit in the video, I know that I told you guys about a kind of a hierarchy system that I use to make sure of what goes where and to be consistent. And the hierarchy is usually pretty simple because it is, as I said, very biased to the standards of how harmonics charted rock band stuff. So, green cymbal. Usually the green cymbal is most likely going to be a crash cymbal. If I'm in a section and I'm going to start the next section on a single crash cymbal, it's probably going to be green. But green can have other uses because I'm pretty sure there are a couple of charts, official charts from Rock Band, that use the green cymbal in some sections as a right cymbal, especially because in those sections there is some tom work going, and you have to think that it's way more intuitive if you're playing the right and then doing stuff on the tom. It wouldn't make sense to put that to right on the green to leave your left hand to play on the yellow and blue. And you could be thinking, yeah, okay, but why not just leaving in the blue cymbal, on a pro drum? Because regardless of that, your left hand is going to be free to play anything under on the toms. And while yes, that is true, we also have to remind ourselves that even though like most people, let's say most people that play Rock Band have a pro drum kit, they have to make sure that the charts and the drums are still playable on the very bare bones 4-lane pad, which is something that some people might overlook. One example of a chart that I did that of putting the right and the green cymbal was, I think, in my 6 o'clock by Dream Theater chart. And then just to close out the green cymbal, sometimes I might use it if we have like more than a couple of splash cymbals. So let's say a drummer is playing a section that's very heavy on like 2 different splash cymbals and a stack. I might, kind of arrange them some of them to be on the green. And I think this pretty much covers how I think on the green symbol. So now let's go to the blue symbol. So first of all, right symbol, which is, as I said, biased from rock band charting. But as everything, there are other uses for the blue symbol. Usually my second item on the hierarchy for the blue symbol is a China, but what if in a section you have both the right and the China playing? Ooh, what do I do now? And yeah, that already happened quite a lot. I'm probably going to put a video of mine, a chart of mine on where that happened. I'm going to do the research. But in that case, is the China or the right going to be in the blue? Like, to me, honestly, I would keep the right on the blue and move the China probably to the green, which is exactly what Rock Band did when they released the chart for Subdivisions by Rush in the ending. That there's this very the news going back and forth on the China and the right, and the China is charted as a green and the right is capped as a blue. So now going back to the green symbol, it is not only a crash symbol, but a stack or a splash. It can also be a China. And then in the blue, I might also put stuff that, is very like sporadic to the song, like a tambourine. Usually splashes, I have a bias to put that on the blue also. So I think, yeah, that's pretty much about it. And by the way, the blue can also be another crash symbol. So let's say that you have a crash symbol on the E on the 4 to kind of make way for the downbeat of the next bar. And the E on the 4 is a crash symbol, and the downbeat of the next bar is another crash symbol. I'm going to keep my bias as the downbeat being a green symbol and put the blue symbol as that crash that comes before. But honestly, I think that in this specific case, I moved the upbeat, the crash that goes on the E and the 4 to the yellow. I think that makes more sense. I don't know. It's case by case. And this is pretty much what blue does when I'm charting. On yellow, one good thing about charting for phase shift is that you don't have to waste two colors on the hi-hat because we already have the closed hi-hat and the open hi-hat being, their own things on the yellow. Because as I said way before, if you look at a chart of Tom Sawyer and a lot of stuff, a lot of songs, they have these dynamics of using the hi-hat closed and the hi-hat open. I think on Lazy Eye, that's a good example that all of the parts of the song that there's a closed hi-hat, it's a yellow, and all of the parts of the song that the hi-hat is open, it is a blue. So you're using two different colors to represent the same thing in different states, which is something that we don't need to do with phase shift because you already have specific visual cues for and closed hi-hat and open hi-hat. To me, honestly, yellow is the color that I use the least, I would say. As I said before, on that example, when I have a crash on the E on the 4, like on the upbeat, and then another crash on the downbeat, I'm gonna put the crash of the upbeat, probably instead of going to, in recent times at least, instead of putting that on the blue, I'm going to move that to the yellow. Most likely, first of all, a crash symbol, especially when you have the two crash symbols going, the very powerful downbeat is usually green and yellow. And then after that, usually stacks go directly to yellow. A good example of that is the chart for On the Backs of Angels by Dream Theater that I did on the pre-chorus. Mostly Dream Theater stack heavy sections. Also on the song Clarity, but on the chart of Clarity by Protest the Hero, there's some sections that have a stack, either a stack or a second splash. So yeah, as I said before on the blue, if we have two different sizes of splashes, they're going to most likely be on the blue and the yellow, and I'm going to put them in a way that makes sense on how the sticking would work. And that's pretty much it. Also, by the way, on the songs of my album, another shameless self-plug, I'm very sorry about that. If you want to listen to my record that I just dropped 1 year ago, it's called Viewpoints, progressive metal album. It's going to be a link in the description. I'm sorry, I'm finished. Another example of how I would use the yellow symbol as a crash symbol is, let's say you're riding the ride on the blue, and then you're going to hit a crash symbol along with the right symbol. It to me would be kind of weird for to make you kind of hit the ride with your left hand and then hit the green with your right hand, even though the green is usually my go-to for crash symbols. So I think it's way more natural to keep your right hand, your dominant hand, on the ride, and then just use the yellow because it is there as a crash symbol for that downbeat. So that's another use for a yellow symbol. Also to note, one, in my opinion, creative way to using the yellow symbol that I have used is as cowbells, because in the end of the day, are cowbells like symbols? They're not symbols, but should they be charted as symbols? Should they be charted as toms? Which make any sense? Like, what makes more sense, in my opinion, is as symbols. Two instances that I have used the yellow symbol as a cowbell would be The Enemy Within by Rush and Lines in the Sand by Dream Theater. And guess what? Yes, the yellow symbol can also be a China. You know, for that to happen, to me, the condition is that we are already in a section that is very heavy and busy on the right, on the blue, and already using the green as crash symbols. And then on top of that, you have Chinas. So we're gonna put them. In that case specific, I put them on the yellow, but I'm not really a fan of that. It's just really a compromise for the chart to be, you know, as accurate as possible while still retaining the playability. So I think this is the conclusion on, you know, the insight of how my inner gears work when I'm charting, and the biases and the preferences that I might give to certain parts to make them feel natural. As I said before, every song is a different beast. Sometimes different sections of the song have to be treated in different ways. Sometimes you have to compromise, being consistent for being natural and playable, which I think it's what's important at the end of the day. When you play a chart, it has to feel right. And I think I would keep, you know, the feeling right aspect, you know, being natural and being understandable. You know, I might give that a preference over being 100% consistent on how I put stuff, you know. Also, as I said before, I like to do some research, and I think that helps me to kind of put stuff in place, to know the drummer, to know how his drum set is, you know, assembled, how many cymbals it has, how many toms the drummer has, you know, because that might be a factor of being like, oh, okay, now that I know this is going to make my life easier when I'm charting, because I'm already not going to be hacking my brain off to knowing which drum is which pitch and which cymbal is which pitch, you know. So I hope that this video is not as rambly as I thought it would be, or it was very like stream of consciousness. I tried to go to all of the points that I wanted to talk about, and as I said before, I'm going to try to make them as concise as possible in the editing. But yeah, I hope this might be an interesting insight, might bring something, you know, interesting for you, or just be entertained. So yeah, thank you guys very much for being with me until this point and growing the channel. If you guys want to check out my Twitch channel, is going to be another link in the description. I'll be very stoked if I saw any of you guys on chat. I have a bucket list of charts that I want to do in the near future, so stay tuned. Please subscribe if you find the content interesting, and yeah, until next time. Bye everyone, thank you very much.